Time moves fast. Haley Welch went from a random street interview to Hawk Tuah girl to crypto scammer all in about a year, while her might have been but probably not boyfriend Sam Darnold went from competing for a starting job in Carolina with Baker Mayfield to being the first quarterback to ever win 14 games in his debut season with a new team in the span of about 2. No doubt, this has been Darnold's best season by far. He's put up career highs in passing yards, touchdowns, and passer rating, along with a career low in interception percentage and 5 game-winning drives, which matches his total across his first 7 years in the league. The belief in both Darnold and this Vikings team has grown exponentially every week. Had he and the Hawk Tuah girl actually been dating, maybe he could have kept her from entering the darkest possible timeline. Probably not, but that's just how good he's been this year. You wonder what all he's capable of. But Sam's arrival comes at a weird time for both Minnesota and himself. Only signed through this year for $10 million, and the future and number 10 pick JJ McCarthy already on the roster, Darnold is in a bridge quarterback situation, but playing like the franchise guy. At this very moment in time, the conversation around what the Vikings will do with Darnold next year might be the most interesting, ripe with a bunch of branching scenarios for the subject of everyone's favorite subreddit. In this video, we'll break down the key areas of why Darnold has been so good this year, talk about how different postseason outcomes could affect where he lands, predict the kind of deal Darnold could fetch on the market, and discuss where JJ McCarthy factors in to all of this.
What's LFG stand for?
It's let's bleep go.
Oh, okay. I love it.
So I mentioned it briefly at the top, but Darnold has been fantastic this year. He's top 5 in passing yards, touchdowns, rating, and yards per attempt, all while his team is in position to steal the NFC's number 1 seed from the Detroit Lions. But when you peek under the hood, you see that Darnold has improved significantly in some of his worst areas, like turnovers. We've actually seen him take better care of the ball in real time throughout the year. In his first 9 games this year, Darnold threw 10 picks and was bailed out with wins in 2 and 3 interception games against weak opponents in the Colts and Jaguars. The Vikings, as a team, had the 4th most turnovers in the league at this point. Since, Darnold has thrown just 2 picks over his past 7 games. Alec Lewis of The Athletic referenced in a recent article how Rich Gannon suggested before the season that if Darnold just limited his turnovers, the Vikings could be onto something big. So far, Gannon's being proven correct. One of the ways Darnold has limited these interceptions has been by being much better against both pressure and the blitz this year. Not only does he have the lowest turnover-worthy play rates of his career in these situations, but he's been productive in them too. He grades 3rd best when blitz and 5th best under pressure in the league, and this is a huge development for him since this used to be the book on Darnold. Get him hot and bothered, and watch him make bad decisions like catching mono at the club. Judging from his sound bites over the past 2 years, it sounds like his improvement comes from being more confident inside schemes designed by top-notch coaches like Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco or Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota. This isn't to disparage the genius that was Matt Rule in Carolina or Adam Gase in New York, but when you read between the lines, Darnold isn't saying anything we didn't already assume. When asked about his time in San Francisco this year, he said, "It was huge. Just being able to learn how they do things over there, not only schematically, but as an organization." Maybe I'm being biased, but I would imagine if it was the other way, he was coming from a place like San Francisco, Minnesota, Pittsburgh, or Kansas City, and landing in Carolina or New York, he probably wouldn't have this quote. I also remember when he first landed in SF, he did an interview with Pardon My Take where he mentioned how many more answers he had for what the defense was throwing at him. And the story appears to be more of the same in Minnesota. O'Connell is a former quarterback who has designed an offense that wants to get the ball to superstar receiver Justin Jefferson. And this sounds simple enough until you realize that the defense has designed their whole plan around denying that. So, to counter it, his scheme builds off itself throughout the game, wanting his players and staff to know not only which play they're running and why, but when they're running it too. In a way, the Vikings have set up a choose-your-own-adventure offense, telling a story through their formations and play calls to then get certain reactions or looks from the defense later in the game. From there, Darnold gets a multiple-choice question. Does he go this way or that way? And then he turns to the corresponding page and lets it rip. And perhaps no stat better tells this marriage story between Darnold and O'Connell than his newfound effectiveness on play action. Much like his performance under pressure, this has been by far and away his best year in play-action situations. He grades 5th overall via PFF, and why shouldn't he? With his arm talent, the threat of Aaron Jones in the run game, and outstanding pass catchers in Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson, it's no wonder that he's become lethal off play fakes. Because of how good he and the team have been, the Vikings have made it no secret they want to bring him back for 2025. Now, teams don't always do what they say, but I think there's a very high chance this is the case. Of course, the way they bring him back could vary greatly, both in terms of what a new contract looks like or if they use the franchise tag on him. And I think just how this postseason goes for Darnold will have some influence on what happens next. While I hope this doesn't happen, there's a world where Darnold gets injured before or early into his first playoff game. Depending on the severity of the injury, this could be the one scenario where Darnold is not a Viking next year. Basically, the team decides to put the ball in McCarthy's hands and let someone else take a chance on a one-year wonder coming off an injury. The other sad option is that Darnold completely craps out in his first postseason game, almost a Flacco situation with the Browns from last year. Of course, Darnold is 10 years younger and has been 5 times better this season, so it's not the same calculus, but there'd be a similar gut punch to the franchise and its fans. Still, with how good they've been and how the roster has seemingly rallied around him, I think the Vikings franchise tag him and go into training camp wanting a legitimate competition between him and McCarthy. If Darnold is fine in the postseason and wins a game or two, it will make for the most difficult decision for the Vikings. Do they franchise tag him and see if this was all real and bite the bullet for a bigger payday next year if he proves it? Or do they lock up their guy now and worry about the McCarthy situation later? If I had to bet on it, I think a decent performance would lead to a franchise tag designation. Now, if Darnold gets the team to a Super Bowl and plays well or wins it, Minnesota will almost certainly be forced to lock him up to a long-term deal. To give him the franchise tag in this scenario would be a cold, heartless, and calculated decision that may send a weird message to the rest of the players on the team. Like, what do they need to do to get some stability? If the Vikings are champions in February, Darnold shouldn't be asking if he'll get the contract, he should be asking how much it'll be worth. Of course, if the Vikings do decide to franchise tag Darnold, he really wouldn't have much say in the matter. Last year, the quarterback franchise tag was worth $38 million, right between Derek Carr and Matthew Stafford's yearly salaries. Quarterback salaries grow every year though. Just this past offseason, we had Jordan Love's contract break people's brains after 9 good games, while Dak Prescott became the highest paid player in the league just before ending the Browns season in Week 1. And players on the franchise tag aren't safe from this. That tag salary will grow by 120% its value if the Vikings choose to use it a second year in a row on Sam. The point is this: the sticker price of signing Darnold to a competitive deal this offseason may sound expensive at first, but if he continues to play well, he'll only continue to cost more. To get an idea of what a new Darnold contract would look like, I compared his production to 5 other guys who got paid recently in Love, Mayfield, Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa, and Jared Goff. And rather than discuss an actual dollar amount, I prefer using the percentage of the cap taken up by the contract at signing. I think this is a better reference point because the salary cap grows every year, and the ratio of the cap the player takes up can be a good indication of how important they view him. So, next to each QB, you'll see that percentage. A few things to call out in this comparison. First, Baker is the best comparison since his 3-year deal that took up 13% of the cap came off just one good year with a new team. The others on this list were with their respective teams for multiple seasons. Next, of this group, Darnold has experienced the most team success with 14 wins, thrown the most touchdown passes, and holds the best passer rating by 5 points. Only Tagovailoa has been more efficient with a better completion rate and yards per attempt number. There are similar interception totals across the board, between around 10 to 14, and all of these quarterbacks, outside of Lawrence, threw double the amount of touchdowns to picks. And finally, just thought this was interesting, none of these guys are really running quarterbacks, rather they all have functional mobility. With all these factors, I believe Darnold would command a deal between around 18 to 20% of the cap. What prevents him from overtaking that 21% mark for me, even though his numbers are arguably the best of this group, is that he only has this 1 year on his resume with a team who is still getting to know him. He isn't Tua or Lawrence, who have been with their organization since they were drafted, or Goff, who's gotten to a Super Bowl before. There's always that chance that Darnold's just a flash in the pan. Unlikely, I think, but still, the chance is there. I think he'd get more than Mayfield, though, who was in a similar situation, for the simple fact that he's been better than Mayfield was last year, and he's 2 years younger, too. There's almost no way that Minnesota lets him walk to another team, but I think there'd definitely be some suitors with cap space that could try and lure him away. One of those is Tennessee, who has $65 million in projected cap space next year, and I think they've learned that Will Levis isn't the guy there. They have a coach in his first year who could be solid, and I think their early season mishaps, mostly from the quarterback position, made them look like a team much worse than they actually are. There's also Pittsburgh, who has $56 million available. If I were the GM, I'd be at a complete loss of what to do with Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, so why not just say no to both of them and go get Darnold? Mike Tomlin and the Steelers machine is a top-tier franchise and would likely have a lot of the infrastructure in place that helped Sam in San Francisco and now Minnesota. And hey, here's a crazy one, but maybe the 49ers try to bring him back. They have $66 million in projected cap space, and after a year from hell, paying Brock Purdy an absurd amount of money sounds a whole lot less appealing. Darnold obviously liked being there last year, so they may be able to drive a hard bargain for him. Then again, he was in their building last year, so maybe there's a reason they didn't keep him. Again, just to be clear, I think there's a very small chance he plays anywhere besides Minnesota next year, but you just never know. Of course, we can't talk about what the Vikings will do with Sam Darnold without also mentioning what they should do with JJ McCarthy. Before the season, all signs pointed to him becoming the starter. He was impressive in the preseason and looked ready enough to be thrown out there and start his development, but a torn meniscus in his knee completely derailed that. Up until a few weeks ago, there was still a decent group of people that would tell you the whole Darnold thing has been great and all, but Minnesota shouldn't waste any time getting their real QB1 in there next year. Now, that group is a very small minority. So, what do? You've got this kid on your bench who they think can be great, who you use the 10th overall pick on, but suddenly you have a 27-year-old playing like a top 5 guy ahead of him. The knee-jerk reaction to the situation is to say, trade him. That was my first thought, at least. The idea being, McCarthy's value may never be higher than what it is right now. Send him away to the highest bidder on a QB-needy team, get stronger, and open up your Super Bowl window as wide as you can for Darnold to lead you through. Would a team like the Raiders trade away their first-round pick this year for the Michigan quarterback? Would the Browns start yet another rebuild with a deal centered around Myles Garrett for McCarthy? And how interested would the Vikings even be in something like that? But here's the thing. As long as McCarthy isn't becoming a malcontent in the locker room, I actually think it just makes more sense to stash him, at least for a year or two. And all signs point to him really enjoying being part of this Darnold journey, as opposed to being frustrated that he has to wait his turn. Remember, the guy is only 21 years old and is on a cost-controlled rookie contract. Even if you sign Darnold for 3 years and he starts every season, you'll still leave yourself open to a year-long audition for McCarthy when he's only 24, 25 years old. You've essentially got yourself a fairly cheap, highly valuable insurance plan at quarterback. It's not a guarantee that Darnold is actually this good, and if he's not, you're excited to start the new chapter with McCarthy and potentially keep a contention window open if he's as good as what you evaluated him as when he was just coming into the league. It's a unique situation all around, but whoever said that when you have 2 quarterbacks you don't have one, obviously never met Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy. It's cliche to say at this point, but it's true. The Sam Darnold story might be the best one in all of football this year. It's the redemption arc they'd throw you out of Hollywood for suggesting, but somehow Darnold has become a main character in our reality. Maybe something clicked over the past year or so, maybe the talent was always there and it just needed the right environment to shine. Whatever the case, he has done more than enough this year to warrant the Vikings changing their plans at quarterback to include a whole lot more Darnold and a whole lot less McCarthy, at least for the near future. Regardless of what happens through the rest of the season, Darnold has proven he belongs in this league, and I think the Vikings and many people around them are starting to believe that, actually, he belongs with them. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please remember to give it a like if you did enjoy it and consider subscribing to the channel so you can catch the next one. Thanks, bye.